Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties Radio, episode 10 for season 6. My name is Lee. I am in Western Australia and I am joined by Tammy and Vikas, both in Canberra.
Yay.
Hey.
So today's going to be, I was kind of talking about people who are coming and going from countries. So we're going to talk about Avi Yemini, who has claimed that Comedy Central has somehow tipped off the US government to keep him from going to the US. And we're going to talk about Julian Assange because, of course, we are, because, you know, it's like the big thing at the moment. So,
I can kind of, I'll be honest. Okay, so this is me going to say something good about the public service.
Okay.
So the pure,
just be ready,
pure
because it's about to portray this entire podcast and everything we've ever stood for. Okay, go.
Okay, yes.
So the Australian public service may lean to the left. Actually, it would say definitely leans to the left.
May lean, okay.
Yeah. But in terms of doing their duty, they're not as politicized as, say, in the US, right? Mm. Where if you go into certain places, you will see outright hostility towards conservative attitudes or outright hostility towards liberal attitudes based on the public service and where they are. And one such place is LAX airport as you come in. Now, as someone who
Francisco.
As someone who frequently flies in, the photo of Obama was still up at San Francisco airport before I left after Trump's inauguration in 2017. So that gives you an idea exactly how politicized the TSA can be in some areas. Yes. So, and it's kind of like people know it there, but it's not as called out about. But you know, that's the example I like to use. And you know, I'm sure the TSA in SFO, if quizzed about that, would be like, well, there was a delay in getting Trump's picture out here. You know, it's just what happened. They can come up with a million excuses, right? But you know, you kind of sit there and go like, I see what's going on here.
I mean, that may be true. But there's lots of people who go like, I mean, firstly, let's. I mean, I barely know who Avi Yemini is, and I'm in Australia, and I care about politics, and so it's not like we're talking about, you know, Richard Spencer or someone really high profile who maybe some bureaucrat might get.
Well, Avi's kind of blown up on his video exposing Jim Jeffries. Was trending last week.
Sure,
before.
So it's possible. I mean, but it's, you know, we're still talking about, I mean, how many people go through LAX? Like lots. So you know,
but it doesn't take much.
Firstly, it seems like a big deal to us, but also,
it doesn't take much for the head of Viacom or like the head of Viacom's programming to call up the regional secretary of the TSA at LAX airport and say, this guy's coming through, and tip him off about this stuff. And like he said, like Avi was saying, what tipped him off that it was a Comedy Central thing was the type of questioning he was getting.
Well, questioning that we only know about because Avi Yemini is telling us about it. So, like,
sure.
You know, so I think we're going to get into alternative reasons why he may have been denied entry into the US.
Oh, no, we'll definitely get into alternative reasons.
Leaving it, say, you know, those are all possibilities, but let's, like, you know, the only person we're getting any information about this is the person who's being deported. And of course, it looks good for him to be deported because Comedy Central called up the government and said, kick him out. Like, that plays into everything that he is talking about when he talks about fake news and the rest of it. So, like,
well, to be perfectly honest,
which is like, you know, it's different. Like,
hang on. Let's be perfectly honest. This is the immigration system he's asking for.
That's true. But
we have a good point there because
But yeah, like, I guess from my perspective, which I mean, I don't have much to say about this because I don't really know this guy and I don't really care and I don't know enough about US immigration. But like, just, you know, this is the perfect case of where one person's going to say something and it's going to confirm all of their biases and all of their supporters' biases, and that's kind of how the story is interpreted. When really we have no idea what actually happened because the US government's not going to comment on this situation. And the only person with any information who will talk about is the person who was in the room, and we can't verify what they said. So that's
true. It's interesting. I just thought of something that perhaps we spoke about a couple of points offline just before, reasons why he may have been denied, etc.
Yeah.
Entry upon arrival in the US. Something I noticed, Avi's logo is very similar to the ALA logo. And when I was doing some digging around, I noticed that he has a strong connection with the ALA. That is a alternative, I don't want to say the alt-right, but a minor right-wing sort of anti-immigration party. That is, it might be something sensitive that's on the radar for them. He has a strong connection to a political party. He's not just a citizen voicing his views. He's endorsed a minor party and has a lot to do with their active campaign.
A minor party that doesn't even have a single person anywhere. I mean, if they even come close to getting even the remotest of a quota in any parliament in Australia, I mean, I can't even name a candidate, which is I guess maybe.
But Tammy has a point. I mean, after the Christchurch shooting, the monitoring on hard right groups did suddenly, like, they're giving as much scrutiny to hard right groups as they did to mosques in the past. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so they're watching them like hawks. It's possible that they did. You're right. The fact that he's associated with the ALA might be enough. It's not just the ALA.
Yeah, the ALA.
I don't think it would be the ALA. I think it would be. Surely, is he associated with Richard Spencer or anything like that, or any of the big names?
Yeah, he's definitely on the ALA's website as someone that they've endorsed. He uses the same logo, interestingly, as well. So he's got his own Avi sort of Yemini with the sort of like the stars and stripes, that the same logo that they have. Now, another thing that I've noticed as well is that virtually a lot of his, it's that populist sort of commentary it's easy to go viral. So it's just interesting in a country, in a nation like the US, that has a lot of support, that someone like him would be, say, denied. I just find that peculiar, essentially, because it's not that kind of rhetoric, whether it's, obscure to us or to anyone else. It's not really. There's a large proportion of society that does think that way. Looking at other nations, we only have to look at France at the moment with the yellow vests and what's happening there. The ALA at the moment is actually going through a bit of rebranding. They want to separate themselves from the other minor right-wing parties. We already have FON, Pauline Hanson's One Nation. So they want to really separate themselves and look different from the Liberals as well. So they're now rebranding themselves as the Australian Yellow Vests.
Oh, really?
So they really want to look like, not necessarily, I mean, if you look
like
at
a populist uprising.
A populist uprising, and not necessarily a organised political group, from my interpretation. I mean, the Yellow Vest to me is a vigilante protest group. So if they are rebranding in that way, they're saying we're Yellow Vests on election day. They're more so focusing on their agenda then, rather than votes. That's just an interpretation.
So that's interesting that you mentioned that, because, like, the ALA previously, to be perfectly honest, like, the ALA previously was like, okay, we don't like immigration, but we're not as racist as Anning.
Wow, what a slogan. I feel inspired.
Is it that difficult?
It's a low bar, but, you could trip.
Yeah.
But anyway, so as far as I can tell, it's like we don't want to go in that direction. It's just like we like civic nationalism, but we don't want to have a personality cult that supports Pauline Hanson.
Sure.
We want economically conservative policies, but we don't want to be the Liberal Party. So it's just like, it was just like a mixture of everything in, like, this populist kind of sphere. But yet they couldn't actually yet they appeared like a far-right party. And I always got confused, going, like, people calling them far-right. I go, like, this is the most milquetoast out of the far-right parties you can think of. They're closer to the centre. I would say they were closer to the centre than the Liberal Party was.
That's exactly right. It's a populist point of view. It's not. It's not extravagant or extreme. They're not necessarily extremists. I mean,
the most extreme policy they had is something Labor took to the election, which was cancelling 457 visas.
Of course, yes.
So so I'm sitting there and going like, exactly what is their extreme position in your mind? The fact that they have liberty in their name, is that it?
I mean, I think part of, like, the thing is, though, with any minor party, it really depends. I mean, I think it depends what kind of crowd you're drawing, and it depends what kind of candidates you put forward. So, in, like, for the Liberal Democrats, really it's been the David Linehelm party for, a better part of, 8 years or something. 6 years, yeah, whatever. So, and
what has happened to that? Yeah.
He's going to have, at least in terms of, like, if he decided that he wanted the policy to be X, it's really like not like no one can really stop him from doing that, and I think that's going to be much the same with like any other minor party. They might theoretically have a particular position, actually, much as the majors do. Like, the membership of the at least the Liberal Party, they can put forward policies for what they want the parliamentary wing to do, but that can't make the politicians do anything.
Yeah,
which is just to say that, okay, sure, maybe the ALA might be a bit milquetoast when you read their policies, but it depends who are they putting forward and who are their supporters, and are they more or less extreme than the median for however you want to define it. But anyway, we should get back to Avi Yemini because we've already gone for 10 minutes. So do you want to give alternative theories for why he might have been...
yeah. So it was actually.
So actually, I don't know if we should we. Do you want to give a brief explanation of who he is, because like people may not actually know who he is?
I'd be very surprised if people don't know who he is by now.
I think a lot of our viewers might, but certainly the wider population, definitely.
Yeah. So give us
let's assume.
A 20-second overview of who Avi Yemini
is. Okay. So he's an Australian-born, dual citizen holding with Israel commentator. He's usually seen with Sydney Watson and like a whole bunch of other, far-right right-wing commentators, conservative commentators. He served in the IDF. He's fiercely against increased Islamic migration to Australia. And I think that's about it, really. There's nothing more to the guy other than that. He's pretty much a one beat drum on this thing. He really doesn't like Muslim immigration. And given like his affiliation with the IDF and his stance on Israel, I can see where he's coming from. I'd probably be the same way if I was him.
Yeah. It's just interesting that they have these right wing firebrands, I guess, like Sydney Watson, like Avi, but they're not necessarily against radical Islam. They're against Islam. From a lot of the commentary that I'm seeing,
suspect they would say it's one and the same thing.
That it's one and the same. There is no such thing as moderate.
Yeah, I suspect, going by the kinds of people who I see who promote videos and whatnot, I suspect it would just be that moderate Islam is a farce. That if you let these people in, there's going to be radical elements or whatever.
There are radical elements, but to be perfectly honest, this is me this is me being like someone in Canberra who has to listen to people talk about terrorism all the time. All of the stuff that seem to relate to terrorist causes, it's basically stems from like being part of a lower socioeconomic group. Like the guys who did the attack at 9/11 are a huge outlier compared to the other terrorist attacks that they stopped afterwards, right? Like the trucks of peace that's going all through Europe, they're all people living in like the really poor areas who are unable to get jobs and are basically forced, the only thing in their life is really the mosque with their hate preachers and people talking to them Marxist policy. And how, the rich white man is destroying your life. They've only got people who are telling them you need to hate people, like a particular type of people, all day, every day. So,
that's a really good point.
Yeah. So, I sit there and go, like, as soon as you deal with that socioeconomic problem, I think you'll find terrorism of all stripes tends to go down. And as far as I can tell, so if you take a look at like the Brendan Tarrants of the world, the white. The young white kid grabbing a gun and shooting up like a mosque or something, or shooting up a Labour Party thing like Andrew Breivik. Same thing. It's a poor young white man who basically comes from, an area which is just constantly telling them to hate someone. It's pretty obvious what happens when that.
Absolutely.
I think Lee got pissed off. He's walking off.
We lost him. So, just on that topic, why necessarily then would the ALA have that sense? What are they from a poor minority or what?
No. I think ALA is just a populist response. I think they're just trying to be populist. Sorry, not populist. Yeah. Rather, they're trying to say they speak for the average person, which is always a typical political thing. But in terms of like Avi Yemini, as in terms of like why he was rejected from thing, I think you mentioned. I managed to dig up, but you found an article from Channel 10,
yes,
which basically said 15 years ago he'd come to the US a number of times where they rejected him from coming in. Or rather, they had an adverse finding based on the fact that he'd spent too many months in the US, and they basically thought he was trying to immigrate there while having an Australian passport.
He'd gone over the 3 months annually that was is generally permitted. But Vikas, did you say that the immigration laws have actually changed?
Yeah, so 15 years ago, it wasn't an ETSA waiver system. It was something else. It was still a visa waiver system, but it was like a visa. But it was like a stamp that you got when you arrived there, and you kind of just it was. What they did is they copied our system when we went over to this online thing in like 2000-ish. So they just copied our system and did the same thing.
Right.
So now we pay $14 and we get a visa waiver for 2 years. So we just rock up with our Australian passports. They stamp it just like the US passport, and we're in. So previously, I think you actually got like a little stamp on your thing that said like visa.
Right. Okay. So
I'd have to go dig back like 3 passports ago to find the exactly what it looked like.
Okay, a little bit of humble brag there from Vikas on how much you know. Thanks for that. I mean, is there really? I mean, is there anything much more to say about this topic? I kind of feel like.
Oh no! I think we need to actually come back to that point. Is that the TSA might actually have legit grounds?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
they might have taken a long way to get there because they did question him for a long time.
Yeah.
But they might actually have legit grounds to knock him back.
Sure.
Absolutely. I can, just speaking for myself, I've had a similar experience in the US whereby I was pulled aside. I missed my next flight in San Francisco airport. I was on my way to do some contributions for the Republican Party in the US. And generally, I shouldn't have been in breach of my visa in any way, but it was something that happened to me. I was questioned about my interest in influencing foreign elections. Certainly, I did perceive some of the questions to be a little bit, I'm not going to say inappropriate, but they were slanted against the conservative kind of view. And that was quite eye-opening for me. And they might have an interest in that. It might have been something that they sparked up with that. The reason why they pulled him aside, and then there was grounds that they further investigated and found out why. But
you went through LAX, didn't you?
No, actually, it was through San Francisco.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yes, I didn't have a great impression of San Francisco when I first arrived, but I was happy to get to Texas after that.
Yeah. So to Australians who are of a conservative bent, fly through Dallas Fort Worth. It's worth the extra money. You get a nicer experience, and they appreciate us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they were doing a lot of digging and searching around on me, and I can just imagine what he went through. But I believe it's interesting, Sydney Watson also had for those who are not aware, she's a similar sort of online personality like Avi Yemini, and she had a similar sort of experience, except she is a dual passport holder or dual citizen with the US. So Australian and US, and she was.
They're not going to turn her back. You give her a US passport, she'd go through the line.
No, she was just questioned, and yeah. So
she
similar
claims she was
sort of
questioned.
experience.
Again, this is all coming from
Allegation.
Yeah. Oh no! So I can believe they'd question her, but they can't turn her back because she's got a citizenship. There's no way they can turn her back.
No, it'd be unconstitutional.
Well, yeah. I mean, no. If they technically, if they got her on what do you call them, terrorism charges, but then she'd be like on the next flight to Gitmo, right? Like we wouldn't even hear about it. So.
Absolutely, I don't think she's in breach of any of that.
Yet.
All right, well, we've got about 10 minutes left, so maybe we'll switch to the topic of Julian Assange because, I mean, frankly,
got to give him some time.
Pretty big topic. If you avoid the news, Julian Assange, who's previously been in the Ecuadorian embassy for I think it was 7 years, he has been arrested in the UK. Like basically Ecuador relinquished their asylum of him, and he's been arrested for breaching his bail conditions. And there's an indictment against him in the US on various forms of hacking. Well, basically assisting in Chelsea Manning's hacking of the government. So
yes, that's what he's been charged with. Conspiracy to hack or something. What was the exact name? Conspiracy to commit computer hacking.
Yep.
Look, so we've literally just changed the topic from where you get denied from entering a country to someone kicking you out of your country to face charges in another one. The interesting. So I have to find this article, but the article I read the day he got the day he got removed from the Ecuadorian embassy, people were asking the Ecuadorian embassy why now, right? And they basically said they got rid of his internet in like 2017 because he was using it to still do all his WikiLeaks stuff, which they told him to stop doing. So he basically didn't comply with their requests. Apparently, he wasn't looking after his residences, so he was leaving a mess. His cat was leaving a bit of a mess.
From some of the awful details that I've read, he was leaving a lot of a mess along the walls and things like that. And I'll leave you to Google that. It's awful bodily functions I don't want to describe. But
shit-stained walls. That's
right. And they spent a lot of money on his medical costs. So I wonder if that was mental health, what he was going through.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But in case anybody hasn't noticed, $4.6 billion was approved in IMF aid to Ecuador. Just so happens to be coincidental at the same time as his as extradition.
Yeah, I'd say it's very coincidental.
Very, very coincidental.
No, as in, like, not implying that it's not a coincidence. I think it actually genuinely is a coincidence. I mean, it's so I think to get to kind of the substance of particularly the extradition to the US it's going to be a question of to what extent is he a journalist, because from my personal perspective, I think WikiLeaks has done the work of journalism, and essentially they're trying to charge him for. So
I just linked Peter Grest. So Peter Grest has a different opinion to you. I just linked his article. So Peter Grest was the journalist that was imprisoned in which city?
Egypt?
Which country? Egypt. Was it Egypt? Tammy, he's one of your guys. And by your guys, I mean journos. Tammy's just there like, I can't remember.
That's all right. Egypt. Yeah.
Egypt, yeah. So Peter Grest was actually imprisoned for for making for an unflattering piece on the Egyptian government, and he's basically saying Julian Assange is not a journalist, and it's based on he says. So when his point was when those leaks came out, when subsequent other leaks have come out, his organization and other media organizations have spent a lot of time and money to make sure that they made sure that names were blurred out and stuff like that. Well, as WikiLeaks just took all of it and just dumped it on the internet for everyone to take a look at. And basically
There's
said
no ethics in terms of privacy. Yeah. Yeah,
and he basically said they operate as though if that's journalism, it's just completely unethical journalism. And his point is, don't confuse it with journalism.
Sure, but
well, it could be argued that citizen journalism, which is, sorry, Lee, I interrupted you there.
You raised a good point. No, keep going.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the journalistic climate is changing. Citizen journalism has been more prevalent since, social media and Twitter. So we're in a different climate now. It could be argued that do citizen journalists have to adhere to the same code of ethics that traditional journalists from traditional media outlets have to adhere to?
So
can I jump in at that point? Like, I think also the question is unethical journalism still journalism? And I think it is. So, clearly I think WikiLeaks should be, not getting people killed in Afghanistan because of collaborating with working with the US government. But I mean, I think ultimately that's still what they're going after him for. They're still going after the fact that he published documents that they didn't want him to publish, which is, it's the work of journalism. Like, it is to uncover this information and disseminate it. So,
sure. So I agree with Peter Gress, but for a reason he completely missed. So the actual charges that he's being charged with isn't so much the reporting. So they haven't actually charged him for the reporting at all. They haven't charged him for anything. They haven't charged him with anything of like, oh, you released the name of someone in an operation. They haven't done any of those. The only thing they charged him with was apparently WikiLeaks helped Bradley Manning hack the NSA. So they gave him computer aid and stuff like that. So this is like, if you want to put it into like a non-IT specific, imagine if like your journo was talking to an informant, and instead of taking the story from that informant, the person said, hey, run this program at your work, right? It'll help you get the data for what we're about to publish, right? So helping steal trade secrets is what they're alleging WikiLeaks did. Now, if true, I don't think even if you're a journalist, that's ethical.
No.
That's basically aiding in stealing data. I don't think. I think journalists can be the recipients of stolen data, but I don't think they can aid in stealing the data.
Okay, so if say, here's a counterpoint. So say a journalist wants to, somebody who says, I've got information that that basically, this my employer or the agency I work for is doing the dirty. I don't have a way of recording it, and then the journalist gives them a recorder.
Yep, same thing. So in the real world,
think that's unethical?
That is actually unethical. Journos don't do that. They say, "Can you get a recording?" They don't actually give them the recorder.
Sure, okay, but there's still.
I think it'd be checkbook journalists. I think definitely would, but generally, you'd hope that journalists would have some form of code of ethics that they'd adhere to, that they wouldn't do that. And code of ethics for journalists as well is cultural, and it depends on their organisations that they work for as well. It's not set in stone. It's nothing legal. That's why citizen journalism is a grey area, because they don't necessarily have a code of ethics that they adhere to like traditional journalists do as well. But it's very interesting the point you brought up, Vikas, whereby you said that what Julian Assange is being alleged to have done is to provide the vessel for this breach of security.
Yep.
But you'd have to think, wouldn't the person who distributed that information through the vessel, through Julian Assange or WikiLeaks, be the person at fault? So that was Bradley Manning Chelsea Manning.
Yeah. So he's already been charged for that, and
of course, yeah.
And sorry, she's already been charged for that, and her sentence has since been commuted. So in 2017, she was forced to come back and act as a witness for this computer hacking charge.
Absolutely, but and definitely they should be at fault for that to some degree. So they've breached their employment contracts. They've breached national security.
Yep.
But the vessel that provided it.
Well,
I don't.
yeah. So
it's ambiguous. So I'll agree that it is ambiguous, but I don't know the exact state of the law in the space. So if there's a criminal lawyer in this, they can probably clear up the exact elements that define what would define a breach of this particular crime. But I'm just laying out what they've accused him of. Right? I'm saying what they've accused him of isn't the actual reporting.
Sure, of course, because that would be a clear violation of the First Amendment.
Of the First Amendment, yeah.
So that doesn't mean they're still not trying to get. They're still not charging him for the behavior that the New York Times or the Washington Post or like that. That's the thing at hand. Is this? Are they trying to get him? It's like they didn't get Al Capone on bootlegging; they got him on tax evasion. So is this trying to get him on tax evasion, or is this is this genuinely a separate thing? No.
If that's the argument, I absolutely agree with you. They're going on a completely different charge to get him because it's the only one that's available.
So they're punishing him. Well, yeah. So they're still punishing him for being a journalist, even an ethical one. But nevertheless, they're punishing him for which is I think sets a bad precedent. Where you don't want them doing that to other journalists, which presumably, given the vast nature of federal law, undoubtedly journalists will breach it for other reasons, and then they'll chase after those journalists not for publishing things the government doesn't like, but because they've stuck their head above the parapet, they're going to get it shot off.
Okay, so shock horror. I don't mind them imprisoning unethical journalists. They're the kind that you either don't want working or not really operating. Right, that's the unethical kind. Are not the one. The unethical people are not the ones we want running around. But having said that, I might agree with you that it's probably not best for the government to define that.
Yeah. So I think there's
and the government doesn't.
Yeah, I think there is a response to other ethical journalism that doesn't involve the government throwing journalists in prison. So it's fine to critique. There's lots of reason to criticize Julian Assange. That's fine. The question is, should the government be prosecuting people for leaking stuff that they just don't like to have leaked? And I don't think that should be the case.
Yeah, sure. That's a no-brainer. But like I said, that doesn't mean... I agree with you, but that doesn't mean if he has technically met the violations that this constitutes for this particular act. I don't know all the elements. He might actually, but I don't know. The description I got from a vague reading on what was in the media was they're basically accusing that he helped. The exact thing is, so all of the government's network are basically audited, and they gave Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning, a way to basically conceal his movements through the network.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. So
wow.
Yeah. So I'm like there seems to be a lot of aiding and abetting there.
Yeah.
So if proven to be true, I kind of agree with their assessment on, hey, yeah, he may have technically gone from being a journalist to being a co-conspirator in the actual crime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, you go, Tammy.
Oh, I might have a similar point to you. I'm not sure, Lee, but my stance is what defines journalism. The journalism landscape has changed so much now that it's not as rigid as it once was in the past, and that could be a good or a bad thing. But the citizen journalists, the power's in their hands now. People who are distributing things online, that's journalism, and there aren't necessarily...
We're journalists.
Exactly. We are journalists. Exactly. That's exactly right. And there aren't necessarily codes of ethics that are legal that bind them. And even so, in terms of, really, the market determines itself with journalism in Australia. If you do something that goes against the code of ethics, maybe your employer will hold you to account, but maybe the journalism community will as well. And so I think it is a grey area with Julian Assange in that. I don't think it's necessarily journalism. I think traditional journalism, but it's certainly some form of citizen journalism that doesn't have a code of ethics. What is the code of ethics for citizen journalism? It's the market regulates itself. So, and there's definitely a lot of people that support what Julian Assange did as well. I think we're quick to denounce what was wrong, but there are a lot of supporters for what he has done.
Yeah, Trump used to be one of them.
He's flipped up
Yes.
all over, like everything else. Trump has flipped backwards and forwards in that one.
His amnesia on it has been hilarious. It's like, I don't know about WikiLeaks. It's not my cup of tea. And like someone actually, after that, they play like all of the number. He mentioned WikiLeaks 161 times. 161 times after they did the DNC leaks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you sit there and go like, mate.
What, Trump being not having a good grasp of the truth? Surely not. All right. Well, we'll leave things there. We've run out of time for this week. Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we'll be back again next week.
Yeah.